In the past 3 videos in this series, we went over environmental factors affecting damage, essential components of damage strategies, and the basics of setting up damage. Now that we understand how enemy health, buffs and debuffs, and surge stacking work, let's explore what the best damage strategies in Season of the Deep actually use. This video will be a short one since I won't be going over much history, only what's best for damage right now, which is pretty straightforward in Season 21. Part 4. Current Meta. Sources. There are 4 major categories of damage sources that are prominent in the Season 21 meta, and we'll go into detail describing each of them in this video. Rockets. Let's start with the explosive elephant in the room. Rocket damage has been an essential part of Destiny's damage meta for several years now, and with the addition of Gjallarhorn during the 30th anniversary DLC, they rose to dominate the top of the endgame damage meta. With no precision requirement and huge splash damage, rockets are the premier choice for nearly every boss in Destiny 2 at the moment. Thanks to their high per shot damage and excellent compatibility with swap rotations and perks, damage strategies involving rockets can be tuned to any environment, whether the situation calls for long versus short distance, burst versus sustained damage, or grenades versus shotguns. In fact, the vast majority of damage challenges in the current meta involve players figuring out exactly how they can integrate other damage sources with rockets to pump out the most damage on a specific boss. As for specific options, the 3 best damage rockets in the game are without a doubt Apex Predator, the Hothead, and Cold Comfort. Being members of the best rocket frames, adaptive and aggressive, bundled with unique perk combos that allow them to excel in specific circumstances, it's no wonder these rockets are seen so frequently in top-tier damage strategies. To be specific, Apex Predator has access to enhanced reconstruction and bait and switch for standard swap rotations. The Hothead remains the only high damage rocket with Clown Cartridge for pure rocket spam, and Cold Comfort combines Envious Assassin and the Restoration Ritual origin trait in order to produce the highest raw burst damage of any rocket in the game. Filler. I use this next category to describe any weapons used to fill the gap between a rocket's firing delay cooldown or automatic reloads. These weapons can vary in their form, ranging from shotguns to snipers to grenade launchers, but they all serve one purpose one way or another, augmenting rocket damage without being the star of the show themselves. The vast majority of the time, the list of meta filler weapons is pretty short. Slug shotguns are by far the most common option, with rapid-fire snipers, lightweight grenade launchers, and rapid-fire fusion rifles making an occasional appearance alongside Izanagi's Burden and Witherhoard. Slug shotguns with their high damage profile are used in double slug and Izzy slug rotations, with the best options being Heritage and Fortissimo 11 in the kinetic slot, and Ness's Ablation, First and Last Out, and Sojourner's Tale in the energy slot. Depending on the circumstance, different damage perks may be preferred. Recombination over Vorpal for short phases, Surrounded over Vorpal when nearby enemies can be controlled, with reload perks like Reconstruction and Autoloading Holster being favored as well. Additionally, sometimes pellet shotguns like Reeswalker, Wastelander M5, Without Remorse, and Xenoclast 4 are also used for damage, as slug shotguns lose a significant amount of damage without precision hits on bosses like Oryx and Tanyx. As for rapid-fire snipers, players usually opt for Distant Tumulus with Clown Cartridge and Firing Line, or Aikilos SR with 4 times a charm and high impact reserves. Finally, when it comes to grenade launchers, Autoloading Holster is a must, with a damage perk like Vorpal Weapon or Frenzy paired with spike grenades. While Wilderflight is easily the best swap GL thanks to its special double fire frame offering a free 30% damage boost over lightweights, people often use Empty Vessel or Truth Teller instead because not many players have a strong Wilderflight role. Abilities. In previous years of Destiny, melee abilities dominated the boss damage meta in every endgame activity, from 2-hammering the inside of Atheon's knee to skipping almost the entire boss fight in the Glassway GM Nightfall with a single shield bash. Today, melee abilities have taken a back seat, and in their stead, we have slightly less overpowered grenades. While grenades have also been reined in a little bit by the Sandbox team, they are still capable of competing with or elevating heavy weapon damage rotations to an entirely different level under the right conditions. In today's Sandbox, the 2 prime examples of strong grenade damage strategies involve Verity's Brow with Touch of Flame fusion grenades, as well as Sunbracers with Touch of Flame solar grenades. On top of this, damage supers are as potent as ever, including Star Eater Skills boosted Blade Barrage, Gathering Storm, and Golden Gun, Curus boosted Thunder Crash, and even Needlestorm as the natural pairing with Warlock's best damage subclass in Season 21. As previously discussed, how useful abilities are can depend strongly on the encounter in question, but there is no doubt that abilities like Blade Barrage and Fusion Grenades can fill a versatile set of roles, from massive burst damage to filler between rocket firing delay. Exotics. Something I mentioned in part 2 was the idea that some exotic weapons' special trait is that they are essentially higher damage versions of their legendary counterparts, which makes them worth using during damage. Think about the Fourth Horseman. It's essentially an extremely high damage and fire rate pellet shotgun. The same applies to weapons like Merciless and Izanagi's Burden. While the existence of Gjallarhorn overshadows the use of anything in the power slot besides a legendary rocket in most instances, we'll be sizing up options like Leviathan's Breath, Legend of Acreus, and Grand Overture in the next video. Otherwise, exotics serve structural purposes, filling roles like buff, debuff, or some sort of unique benefit like Pack Hunter or Penance, which we went over in part 2. In 95% of optimal damage scenarios, the only raw damage exotics in use include Izanagi's Burden, the Fourth Horseman, Parasite, Grand Overture, Legend of Acreus, and occasionally Conditional Finality or Witherhoard. Exceptions. While rockets are the go-to for almost every damage scenario in Destiny 2's current state, there are some cases where a situation calls for something unorthodox. For example, rockets don't make as much sense on bosses like Crypt Security and Atrax thanks to the design of set encounters. On Security, high object damage weapons like Bastion and the Fourth Horseman are much more effective. On Atrax, because of the incredibly short phase length, weapons like Parasite find more value than rockets, which require just a little extra time to outpace said choices. Covering every exception would be too long of a task for this video, but in part 6 we will go over every single boss in the game, as well as what is currently used to melt them the fastest at the highest level of play. Exclusions. You may be wondering why certain weapons were left out of this snapshot of the current meta. An obvious example is linear fusion rifles, so let's ask why options like Cataclysmic and Briar's Contempt aren't currently optimal damage options. Unfortunately, the release of Gjallarhorn essentially pushed legendary rockets ahead of every other power option by 30%, which left Bungie with two options. Either buff other legendary power options to the point where legendary rockets without Gjallarhorn are severely disadvantaged, or nerf Pack Hunter in some way. Since both options would likely be largely unpopular, the sandbox has existed in a state where, try as they might, even an entire year's worth of linear buffs never truly surpassed rockets in raw damage. Even at the peak of linear fusion rifle viability in Witch Queen, pre-15% Lightfall nerf and post-bait-and-switch buff, even if we include bug charge bypass firing line Stormchaser, today's rockets far outpace any legendary weapon damage from any point in Destiny history. There are also some exotics that aren't really ever considered optimal damage options even in endgame damage scenarios, despite their popularity or supposed potency, from Thunderlord to Outbreak Perfected. I won't go deep into this topic here, since in the next video I'll be publishing a comprehensive list of damage rotations, including some of these exotics, which will speak for itself. This video leaves a lot on the table since it's a topic I'll revisit whenever the meta experiences significant shifts. In the intro, we asked ourselves what the best damage strategies actually are, and in Season of the Deep, the answer is pretty much just rockets, with a side of damage supers, maybe some grenades, and some filler weapons and exotics to add damage on top. In part 5, I'll publish my testing data on true health bar damage, and we'll find out what swaps are in fact the best swaps over different time periods.